Hi, my name is Michael Falk. I'm a lecturer in 18th-century studies in the School of English at the University of Kent, and I'm also an adjunct fellow in Digital Humanities at the Western Sydney University in Australia. In my own work, I study authors of the Enlightenment in the 1700s who explored many of the ideas that have come to dominate the world today, such as equality, democracy, and also uglier ideas such as race and slavery. And as a digital humanist, my specialism as a researcher is to use various kinds of artificial intelligence and computational techniques to deconstruct literature and see how the language of literature is put together. In this video, I'd like to talk to you about the value of English. Why is it worth studying English in the 21st century? There are two main values to studying English at school or at university. The first is cultivating the intellect. When you study great works of literature or learn to write yourself, it's a great way of exercising the mind and obtaining new mental skills which are very useful in all parts of your life. But the second reason English is so valuable is for getting a job. It may be surprising to learn, but English or creative writing are actually great disciplines for obtaining marketable skills that will be extremely useful for you in the 21st century, the age of automation. So to begin, let's start with cultivating the intellect. Here are three main ways that studying literature or writing can help you to cultivate your mind. The first is that literature can help you open your mind. By studying literature, by reading books by all sorts of people from all sorts of parts of the world on all sorts of topics, you expose yourself to new ways of thinking about things, new ways of looking at the world, and new ways of expressing yourself in language. If you throw yourself into literature with the right attitude, you can really open up your mind and think in a more creative and free fashion than if you didn't do this. The great Victorian educational reformer and philosopher Matthew Arnold had this to say about this aspect of literature. What we want is a fuller, harmonious development of our humanity, a free play of thought upon our routine notions, spontaneity of consciousness, sweetness and light. And these are just what culture, or literature, generates and fosters. Arnold's idea was that by reading or looking at art or listening to music with the right sort of attitude, we could foster spontaneity of consciousness. We could make our mind more fertile and creative and more able to come up with new ideas, which might help you to cope with a new situation as a parent, or as a citizen choosing who to vote for, or as a worker trying to come up with a creative solution for a problem you encounter in your employment. Secondly, literature allows you to think rigorously about ideas. Literary texts tend to bring up important themes like justice, equality, the environment, ethics and morality, and the characters in books or films debate these issues with one another, or through the imagery in a poem, a poet might expose certain points of view on these ideas. By engaging with them, you can learn to think more rigorously about the big, important issues that will affect you in all aspects of your life. The Greek philosopher Aristotle certainly thought this about literature. He had this to say about poetry. From what has been said, it is clear that the poet's job is not relating what actually happened, that's what a historian would do, but rather the kind of thing that would happen, that is to say, what is possible in terms of probability and necessity. For this reason, poetry is more philosophical and serious than history. Poetry utters universal truths. The universal truths concern what befits a person of a certain kind to say or do in accordance with probability and necessity. Aristotle's point is this: a great poem or film or artwork or novel is a kind of laboratory where you can imagine what people are like and how they would behave in a given situation under certain conditions. So if you're interested, for example, in a particular ethical theory like utilitarianism, you might write a novel where you imagine a character trying to live their life according to the precepts of utilitarianism. And by writing this novel, or by reading it later on, you could see whether that philosophy would actually work in practice. And by engaging with literature from across the centuries, you can see how these different ideas fit in with probability and necessity, how realistic they are, how much they fit with the way humans actually behave. And in this way, you can learn to think rigorously about the big ideas. So let's turn away for a moment now from reading and think about writing. How could writing help you cultivate your intellect? Well, one important way is that writing allows you to make sense of experience. Life is an extremely confusing and bizarre thing for all of us to go through, and each of us has to live our life as though it was the first life ever lived. We have to make sense of a future that hasn't happened yet based on a past which, for young people like yourselves, is not a very long past. So by writing, you can review what's happened to you and what's happened to other people and make sense of it. Here's how the great novelist and essayist Arundhati Roy, one of India's foremost authors, puts it. Novels can bring their authors to the brink of madness. Novels can shelter their authors too. Anjum, the main character of Roy's second novel, The Ministry of Utmost Happiness, softens the borders between men and women, between animals and humans, between life and death. I go to her when I need shelter from the tyranny of hard borders in this hardening world. So what Arundhati Roy is saying is that when she writes, she finds that she's building a shelter for herself, a shelter that allows her to make sense of what's happened to her and to go back out into the world with more power and with a sense of greater security. And this is why she says, on the one hand, novels can bring their authors to the brink of madness, because to write the novel, she has to dig into herself and bring up those great anxieties or problems that she's facing. But on the other hand, by writing the novel, by putting those anxieties and ideas in order, the novel becomes a shelter for herself. By making sense of her experience, she makes herself more capable of coping with experience in the future. So those are three ways that literature or creative writing can help you to cultivate your intellect and become a more effective person in all aspects of your lives. But there's a second thing I want to talk to you about, and that's getting a job. How can learning English or writing help you to get a job? Well, the first way is that English and creative writing give you marketable skills. Here is a graph from a report by the global consultancy firm McKinsey. It shows the 12 skills that will be in greatest shortage in the United Kingdom in the year 2030, according to their statistical analysis. How can English help you acquire these important skills that there'll be a shortage of? Well, one thing you do a lot of in English is close analysis of text. You read difficult books and difficult articles about those books, and you learn to make sense of what they mean. This activity helps you acquire 3 of these important shortage skills. Firstly, it helps you with your critical thinking because you have to assess the ideas that are in the text. Secondly, it helps you with your basic literacy, numeracy, and communication. You have to actually read these texts and become better at reading them. And finally, it helps with complex information processing and interpretation. A literary text or an academic article about it is a repository of information which you need to absorb, you need to process it, and you need to interpret it, you need to make sense of it. And there's no doubt that literary texts and articles about them are among the most complex texts that you'll ever encounter anywhere. A second thing you do a lot of in English, and in creative writing too, is analytic writing. You have to write things like essays or learning journals where you reflect on what you've read or learnt and explain yourself in clear, simple prose. This is one of the best things you can do in order to foster your advanced communication skills. People who have studied English or creative writing are extremely good at communicating with other people in the written word, and also through your seminar presentations and discussions, you'll become better at expressing yourself in the spoken word too. Thirdly, when you read literature, you learn to see the world from other people's perspectives, and you learn about the different values that have motivated people in different times and places. And also, when you discuss literature with your classmates, you can learn firsthand how other people respond to literary texts and to things that happen to them in their lives. So in this way, you foster 2 important shortage skills. Firstly, your interpersonal skills and empathy, and secondly, your leadership and management skills, because leadership and management require you to understand other people and to learn how to get the best out of them. Now, you've probably noticed that the biggest shortage skill, according to the McKinsey model, is basic digital skills, and they suggest that there'll be 21.2 million jobs in the UK in 2030 where this skill will be lacking. Studying English is actually a great way of improving your basic digital skills and also your project management skills. When you study English, you have to do research. You have to find the primary texts that are relevant to your topic, and you have to find the secondary texts that will help you to interpret them. To do that, you need to access research databases, learn to query them effectively, and learn to manage all of the data that you end up downloading. And in the 21st century, it's increasingly necessary for you to learn other sorts of digital skills. I teach students how to code at Kent as part of their English degrees, because by coding, they can access texts and analyze them in new ways. And on a number of our modules, students have to do things like develop an ebook, or make a documentary film, or engage with their classmates using an online learning framework. And in all of these ways, you're cultivating various kinds of digital skills, which will be extremely useful for you in the workplace. And by creating these sorts of things like ebooks or documentaries, or even just researching a good research essay, you have to learn project management skills. So in this way, studying English or creative writing will help you to foster 7 of the main shortage skills in the United Kingdom. Here's another graph from the same McKinsey report, where you'll see that the second most lacking knowledge area in the UK in 2030 is going to be English language skills. Need I say more? So this leads me to the second point I'd like to make here, which is it's simply a matter of fact, English graduates are highly employable. Here's some data from the British Academy, which shows employment prospects for people who graduate in Arts, Humanities and Social Sciences, AHSS, which includes English, versus those who graduate with degrees in STEM, Science, Technology, Engineering and Mathematics. And you'll see from the graph that the employment outcomes for these two groups of students are basically identical. 88% of humanities students in work after their degree, 89% of STEM students. It's simply a matter of fact that the kinds of skills cultivated by students in English and other humanities disciplines are in high demand, and as a result, graduates in Arts, Humanities and Social Sciences do not have trouble getting a job. And on this, I'd like to make just one final point to you, which is that English teaches you things a computer cannot learn. In the 21st century, one of the biggest threats to people's employability is automation. With developments in AI, more and more jobs are able to be done by computers. You've probably seen this in the supermarket, where increasingly computerized checkouts are replacing the people who used to scan your groceries for you. In areas such as banking, it was once the case where a bank manager would have to use their own judgment as to whether you get a loan. Now, more than likely, it's a computer model that determines whether you're eligible for a loan or not. And in countless other areas, such as the legal system, government, or human resources, in all of these areas, there's increasing use of artificial intelligence to replace human workers. Now, as a student of English or creative writing, you will be learning things that a computer cannot learn. You'll be learning how to be wise and imaginative and to judge things with tact, to see the complexity of a situation, to empathize with the other humans involved. These are all skills which perhaps one day in the far future computers may be able to do, but at no point in the foreseeable future will computers be able to do any of those things as well as a human can. So by cultivating these kinds of spiritual, intellectual, cultural competences in an English or creative writing degree, or indeed in any degree, if you approach it with the right attitude, you can cultivate the skills that a computer will never be able to do and protect yourself from the risk of automation in the 21st century. So, as you can see, studying English or creative writing is a great way, firstly, of cultivating your intellect, or secondly, of obtaining the skills you will need to navigate the job market in the increasingly automated and digital world of the 21st century. I hope you found this lecture interesting and useful, and if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to email me on my official email at m.g.falk@kent.ac.uk, and I'd love to continue the conversation.